Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to today's episode of Steelers Touchdown Under. We are talking all things the Steelers running game. The Steelers have toutably run for 543 yards in the last 3 weeks alone. Have they renewed their run game? We've seen Jaylen Warren killing it. We've seen Najee Harris talking in press conference. So some people are still on the narrative of Najee Harris versus Jaylen Warren, who's number one, who's not. All those good things. We're going to talk about that and more because there are actually, despite the firing of Matt Canada, and it demonstrates why Eddie Faulkner has been promoted in terms of coordinating the offense off the field. Is the run game is doing really, really well. And actually, over the last 3 weeks, the Steelers have actually fixed the situation that comes with their run game. Let me explain more about that. So the Steelers so far have obviously played 10 games. They're 6-4. In 5 games, they've rushed for less than 100 yards. In 2 of them, they've rushed for less than 60 yards. We saw the 41 yards against the San Francisco 49ers. We saw the 55 yards against the Cleveland Browns in week 2 of the season. Then we saw 87 yards against the Baltimore Ravens in week 5 before the bye. Then there was 86 yards against the Rams coming out of the bye. Obviously, they threw the ball around a bit more there with 214 pass yards, which is their second highest number of pass yards on the season. And then they had 70 yards as well against the Jacksonville Jaguars, whom we know put them to the sword a little bit in that game, despite the score being only 10-20. So that doesn't necessarily fill you with enthusiasm on the run game, but it's the last 3 weeks since then, since that Jacksonville Jaguars loss, since they've gone 2-3, they should never have lost that game against the Browns. We've obviously seen the changes that come from that. Not going to get into that, but 543 yards in 3 games is pretty substantive. I mean, we are talking like 500. That's almost 550 yards. You know, it would be averaging 200 yards per game if it was 600. So we're looking at like a 170, 180 sort of average of the last 3 weeks. That's huge. And remember the 172, which is more than what they even got against the Titans. That came against the Browns, who were meant to have the best run, one of the best run defenses, or the best run defense in the league. So big deal here that you see from the Pittsburgh Steelers running the football, running the rock, as many of us like to say. But how does this compare overall, with the rest of the league? Because this is what I found interesting. You might not know that, like most Steelers fans might not know this. The Steelers are number 24 and 25. They have number 24 and 25 in the league for rush yards. 2 players. Think about that run game. Think about the whole Mike Tomlin running the wheels off the running back. We have 2 guys in there. Najee Harris is 1 yard away from 500. Jaylen Warren is 7 yards away from 500. There are only 2 other teams that have 2 other teams that have more than 2 players. That is Detroit with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, Gibbs invested, I think it was the 10th pick in the draft on this year, and Montgomery's had injuries. And also Baltimore, but Baltimore, one of them is Lamar Jackson. We always talk about Lamar Jackson being that, more of a running back that can throw the football, or some people talk about it like that. This is pretty rare for a Steelers team over the last few years. And it brings back that old school football. This backs up a show I did last week around the offense and how what we've seen, while Canada has been a problem, the actual overall production is kind of roughly what we saw in the first 2 years of Big Ben, believe it or not. Well, at least we're getting the run game to back that up. And this is why if Kenny Pickett, one of the things that I read this morning about the exciting people about Canada leaving, apart from just Canada leaving, is that Kenny Pickett might throw play action more. Kenny Pickett is something like 77% completion on play action. You can do play action when you run the football, and we've got 2 guys now in the top 25. Now, interestingly, when you look at overall attempts, Najee Harris is 19th in the league. That's top 20. You've got to go down to, I think it's 30, 34, 43, before you get to Jaylen Warren, which means, and this is quite an interesting thing, Jaylen Warren has the highest yard number in the highest yards per attempt in the league. 6.2. Now, people talk about Josh Jacobs. We're talking about quarterbacks in here. We're talking about guys that go on only a couple of runs. Jaylen Warren, that is awesome. 6.2. He leads the league right now in yards per attempt. I think that's terrific. I think people should be absolutely thrilled with that. I think he's in the top 10 as well. Yeah, top 5, sorry, for longest yards rush. We talked about that earlier in the week. I did a show around why Jaylen Warren, plus Broderick Jones, equals rushing success because of what he's doing on the right side of things. Jaylen Warren, everyone talked about the 129-yard rush of 9 attempts last week against the Cleveland Browns. Well, actually, if you take out the 74 yards running of 8 attempts, he had 55 yards, which is almost an average of 7, feeds into this 6.2. So pretty incredible there in terms of the yards per attempt. That's I think it's awesome. So that's definitely something that the Steel fans can really latch onto in the success of this running game. Obviously, we see a bit different with Najee Harris has got the football, but we see different schematics there. We see even and both on how the Steelers line up and how the defensive line up to quash Najee Harris style runs. So before we close out the show, one other thing I wanted to talk about was definitely the yards from the line of scrimmage, because I also found this pretty interesting overall. Because when you look at the yards from the line of scrimmage, basically it tells you, it gives you an idea of like how the offensive production is really going from a particular player. Now, we all know Jaylen Warren is producing a lot of yards. Now, Jaylen Warren, this is what I found particularly interesting. He's 34th in the league right now, and we've really only seen him come alive since really mid-season. Like, it's not that he hasn't played well earlier in the season. It's just that he wasn't used as much. The Steelers' offense wasn't used as much. The offense has been poor. That's why the Steelers fired their offensive coordinator for the first time since 1941. Yet Jaylen Warren is creeping his way up on this leaderboard. Like, there are some big names at the top of this leaderboard. CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey. Jaylen Warren could finish in the top 20 in this. You know, Bijan Robinson, one of the best running backs to come out of the draft in years, he's sitting at number 20 with 820 yards. That's less than 100 yards more than what Jaylen Warren's sitting at right now. So I really wanted to share some of these stats with you guys because I'm Steel fans out there, NFL fans out there, because the Pittsburgh Steelers have a run game that is becoming lethal. And that's why it was so important they got rid of Canada, because they can't run the rock every single possession on offense. They've got to be able to supplement that, give their guys a break, freshen it up, get looks for the offense, particularly the success they've had running out of shotgun. You want to actually pass the ball in some of those shotgun plays, so the opposition defense actually backs off that line and gives your guys room for draw plays and sweep plays and runs down the middle. But definitely the Steelers are building something here in the run game, and that bodes well not only for Kenny Pickett, for the offense, but it bodes well for the whole team as a whole. Helps the defense out, keeps them off the field for longer. And as fans, you like Pittsburgh for a reason. We like the Steelers. You like them because they have hard defense and because they can run the rock. Yeah, it's the modern NFL. We want to see them throw touchdowns when they are passing the ball. We want to see them throw regularly for good yardage, good space, give that time. It's about, football is a 3-phase game. You've got to have that work. And that is why it is so important the Steelers are building a foundation here, because regardless of who is the quarterback in the future and long-term future, Steelers in the next couple of years are really building a solid run game. And they can only, in my mind, they can only get better on the O-line, really, with off-season acquisitions. So if we can see this year, imagine what we might be able to see next year with a couple of draft picks or even free agents thrown into the mix. But really excited to bring this episode to you. Really excited about some of these rushing stats. Can't wait to see it again against the Bengals, hopefully this week. As always, go Steelers.